Look at that. He's smiling. Begin every video with a smile. I'm your host, Frederick 24/7, 365. This is just my daily journey, my daily log before I go to Ghana. I've been wanting to be more consistent, just focused to do a video every day. It is pretty difficult to do when you got to do life. You got to work, you got to eat, you got to sleep, you got to do other stuff, but we're just fighting through it. Keep smiling, keep going. But I want to give a shout out to one of the YouTubers I listen to pretty consistently. Since the passing of Kevin Samuels, basically O'Shea Duke Jackson's took in some of the place. I mean, totally in a sense different, but to me, he keeps it real. So I vibrate on his level of understanding. And one is another guy who I've really in the last year or so I swear I met him at a customer's house one time, and that's Corey Holcomb. He was talking about Corey Holcomb destroyed this female pastor for begging for money. This is on his 5150 show, his podcast. So I do have to say fair use what I'm about to play in just a minute. I'm going to show you what I'm watching. But I just want to I'm going to give my opinion of this after, because I grew up in a family with a father that was a Baptist minister. He was a pastor at churches. And I remember certain things happening when I was a kid. And it's funny, and not really it's funny, it's kind of disturbing. My brother's, I hate to say baby mom because he had been with this woman for years, so I always call her my stepsister. Sister-in-law, But she said to me one time, she said, my brother doesn't understand why you have so much anger towards what happened in the past and stuff. He's like, we grew up in the same house. I don't understand why he has such feelings that he did. And if you ever listen to my backstory, his experience and my experience was different, in that household. Now, let's put it like this. You see what I look like. My father looked like Bill Cosby. I'll let you do that. And he was from Mississippi. Deep in Mississippi. No, he was just from Mississippi, outside of, I think Olive Branch was like the closest big city, but not too far from Memphis, Tennessee. But that being said, I was woke or more conscious when I was a kid, but I learned to kind of suppress it or hide it because I saw people for what they were. If you understand what I'm talking about. I saw you for who you are. And when you talk to them about that, it's just like they say, if you're ever in a lucid dream, don't tell the characters in the lucid dream that they're a character in the lucid dream, or they'll flip out on you. Now, I don't know how real that is, but I've heard that. So I've experienced it in this so-called third dimensional reality that we're in. I've talked to characters like they're a character. And you got to remember, when you're a kid, 10 or 11 years old, talking to an adult like they're a character because you're seeing them for what they are, yeah, that could probably not go good for you. So, 3 minutes into this video, I don't think I can flip this around, but I might just play the sound in the background.
Interesting part. Brother Craig Smith, who's a co-host,
I might could flip it
had
around.
A very touching story
I don't know if it'll do
about
that.
his mother and her female pastor. And I just want to play that clip, and I'm going to come back.
I church for your family because my father and my mother met living a certain lifestyle. My father was a working man, worked a lot. He liked to drink and, party.
Fair use.
He was a good man.
O'Shea Duke Jackson, Corey, 5150 podcast.
Better than my father. And she was going to a church where a lot of the women were single. I mean, I'm willing to bet if I had to put a number on, these 70% women in church are single mothers. So anyway, as my mother's relationship grew stronger with God, who
and she grew
strong.
Look at that.
See, touch, or feel. My father lost like a grip on his household, I would say. You know what I mean? And that just kind of, I don't know. It just felt like, he was never at church with us. He never, I just felt like it did more harm than good, And one of the things that made me notice, like, man, maybe something's wrong with this whole thing is I remember the pastor was a female, and she had her 50th birthday party, and
Pimping
she would
God.
have everybody in the church go to her birthday party, and the tickets to her party were
Oh, no.
$1,000 each.
$1,000 tickets.
Mother trying to figure out how to come up with the bread. I remember that it was like a 3-month period where, she was saving and trying to figure out how she can get to the party.
So guys, you heard that, and again,
Let's put that back on pause. So, this is an interesting story because his experience, he was dealing with a female pastor. My father was is a male pastor, Baptist church, and it's a story into this, so we can't go too deep into it because kind of at a later time I got to break more stuff down. But I'm gonna give you this moment that kind of really woke me up, and I wish my mother had came out of, but she did whatever she did to save her family. So she dealt with this guy for 33, 35 years of her life until she passed away, and her main goal was keeping the family together. She had a daughter, she had a son. This guy, I mean, he was there. They had some kind of relationship feelings. I know further as they got older, things changed, but her mindset was keeping the family together. So I really can't judge either one of them because they're humans. They're going through this shit they're going through. But this is a story I want to tell. So it's almost 7 minutes into this video. But once again, fair use for O'Shea Duke Jackson. The title of this one is Corey Holcomb destroys his female pastor for begging for money, I guess. The fair use he was using was Corey Holcomb's 5150 podcast, where he had a guest on there talking about his situation. So now, 7 minutes into it, I'm talking about the situation I have. And where I understand that this whole religious thing here in America, and it's probably all of these religions in general, are probably doing in some shape or form a form of control. Is it financial, physical, spiritual? They're using some kind of control over people because obviously whoever these gods are or God is, they haven't been here in a while. So let's think about it. Prime example for God to be showing up of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Social media show up, you're everywhere instantaneously. So I know somebody's going to come in and say, oh, God's going to come in. They're going to, because their mind cannot deal with what I'm saying. And that's their issue. And it's hard. I understand. Their mind has to protect their ego. And I understand, man. It's a very hard thing to come to a grips with because it's fear. And that's how they get people. They get out of fear. Fear your ass going to hell. Fear you're going to get punished, Let's put it like this. I've been doing pretty decent, and I haven't went to church at least in a year. I promised somebody I would go to this one church. I went about a year ago, I even stay close to T.D. Jakes' church, Potter House. I mean, I listen to him, whatever he's talking about, but look, it's a game to me. It's a game. And this is why, once again, let me focus on why I feel like, and I know in my spirit it's a game. So going back to, I had to be between, I want to say 14 to 17, maybe 14 to 18. Let's just go 14 to 18. Most likely I was about 16 when this happened. And that means my brother would have been like 14. My dad, who was a Baptist minister, when I went to church, the two churches I remember, he was pastor at. One was bigger than the other. One was in Mississippi. One was in Memphis. I remember this is between the churches or somewhere. It was after the first church that I knew. To my knowledge, I knew he had three, but this is after the second church. It could have been around the same time as the third church or right after the third, but he made this statement. So something hyped him up. And I know he was probably watching like G. Patterson or something like that, some of the big names there in Memphis at the time. And we were all in the kitchen. And the kitchen we had, it was a pretty decent sized kitchen. Hell, it's probably the size of my living room and kitchen, just to think how big that was. And it was just, I was sitting over at we're in a sense the dining room, but it was where we ate at. And my dad was by the stove or something like that. And my mom, something like maybe she was sitting down in there, or maybe I was there, but I can't really remember where I was. But I was in the kitchen, and my mom was in there, my dad was in there, and I know my little sister was in there, because she just didn't go anywhere without my mom. It ain't like she's going to be in the bedroom hanging out, you know what I'm saying? Because she's 9 years younger than me. So just say if I was 16, she had to be 7. So I knew she was in there too, but she's a kid. So my dad started talking about, what do you say? I'm going to build the biggest church in Memphis, and my 2 sons are going to be my deacons, because I think I had already so-called got baptized, and, my dad was making me into maybe trying to make it into a junior deacon, but he was very unorganized with these things. And he was like, I'm going to make my 2 sons my deacon, and we're going to have the biggest church in Memphis. And, he was grandstanding. And very few times I've seen my mom kind of really stand up to him in front of the kids. I don't know what she did in behind closed doors, because the arguments were there, but never really in front of us like that. They argued over stupid stuff, but certain things they didn't do. The financial stuff, you could hear it, but they didn't really do it in front of us like that. Maybe later in life, as we got older, they might have talked more because, they just stopped caring. We were older. But we experienced life. So the lights got cut off. We got evicted. There's a lot of stuff happening until my mom just got fed up, and she was a beautician. She just started making the money, had the clientels, and she just started paying the bills. I mean, and my sister, if you're hearing this, hey, that's why I told you, stop complaining. You chose your path. Man, you got all these degrees. Stop worrying about what another person's doing. Do it. Make it happen. I know you're going to hear some women going to come on here and talk about, I ain't never paying for no man. Your ass will be alone. Because if you're a woman and you focus your life on going to school and being a provider, you ain't changing up in the midstream and say, okay, I got a man now. And that ain't never been who he is. And that's who my father was. He wasn't that guy. He was not the provider. And my brother has this weird sense of loyalty to him, weird sense of seeing him in a different light. And maybe he did, maybe, when I wasn't there, he bought him some cookies and candies and stuff. Maybe he did treat him different. Maybe he did hug him or tell him I love him. He never did that for me. So I don't know what they did behind closed doors. It could have been different. So I have to take him or whatever is in his mind. But that being said, I told you very few times my mom ever stood up to him. And this was one of those times. She literally got up and said, you are not sending my kid's soul to hell. Oh, man, I've told that story a lot of times. This is funny. And I laughed at it, but I didn't realize how serious it really was, what she was really saying. She was like, your ass ain't for God. You just trying to get paid. You just trying to have money. You trying to do whatever you want to do, but you're pimping God. You're pimping from the pulpit. God is just not going to be here in that physical sense to say right or wrong, or you're pimping me. A lot of people say, well, the good or bad or karma and these things will come get you and such and such. And I can't sit up there and say this. And a man lived 20 more years probably after. Well, yeah, probably. Probably lived at least 10 more years after that. 10. It had to have been long with that because my mom passed in 97. This probably happened in 95. This might have happened in 92. So yeah, he lived older than her. So, I can't keep up with that. That ain't what we supposed to be. We got to focus on ourselves. But that was one of the few times in front of us, she stood up in front of him and was like, no, you're not sending my kid's soul to hell, because she knew he was pimping. He was trying to pimp God, and when I heard this, that's where I went back to, these are why I don't trust like that. And as I've been to a lot of different churches, and people will pray for you and talk the scripture and stuff, but this is the thing you've got to really, oh, dude, that went out. Man, the YouTube connection, I guess it wasn't on long enough, so it shut off in the background. But that being said, man, people will play those games, and as no one stands up to them, they'll keep playing the game. And I think he was talking about in his videos, Juanita Bynum had a moment where she said in church, there was 21 people in that church at that moment was going to give her $1,000, and that all these things are not happening for you in your life, and great things are coming. If you just give up this right now, things will get better. And it's like, you're basically pimping God. You know what I'm saying? You're pimping the religion. And that's what they do, because the system is set up that way. And you won't know if they're for God or not for God, because you won't be there on their judgment day. If there is a judgment day like that, that's the whole point. Your religion that you're into is not your own. Your spirituality you're into is not your own. You were given this by people who betrayed you and manipulated you for years. Your family, your forefamily. So when you really understand it for what it is, you start to wake up and you start to see it, and your mind starts to open up. You just got to be careful who you tell this to, because other people, it is their job. Their job is to bring you back. It's just like, I was watching something today. They were saying, I guess it was W.D. Du Bois made this statement. He was saying that America wasn't set up back in the day to control the slaves. Who actually controlled the slaves was 5 million poor white people. And I'm not trying to go against it and talk about white, but it's the point what I'm about to say is they had no real connection to the elites like that. They had no real money. The only difference between them is the color of their skin. They were poor. They were looked down upon, but because they would help bring the rich person's property back to them and given certain statuses over them and not quote unquote treated exactly the same as them, they were encouraged and entitled to do these things. And this is why America's messed up right now, because the gap between them and the elite has grown exponentially. And why they've been helping them put their bootstraps on who they chose. This is another mind trick you have to understand, who they chose to be on the bottom. Because trust me, they went after the Native Americans first. You got to understand, we're probably talking about 200 million people on this continent back when so-called Christopher Columbus landed here. And maybe less than 20 million. I think I heard something like 5 million. You're probably, look, I could be wrong with that 200 million, or I'm pretty sure it's a lot. It's just say 100 million. If you're down to 5 million out of 100 million, like 20 million would have been 10% of the 200 million. That's still scary. But if you're down to 5 million, real, when I say real, because if you're Cherokee in Oklahoma, and I lived in Oklahoma, one drop of Cherokee blood makes you a Cherokee. That gets scary. And I don't go against the white people for doing it, because they're incentivized to do it. And this is the same thing where you go to India and you have the class system there. Look up something called the Untouchables of India. It's a class. It's everywhere. You could go to China. You can go to Japan, North Korea, South Korea. I mean, they're Koreans. But there's this system of control set in place. And I'm about to go off the rail with this one. But I'm going to Africa. All right. I'm going to Ghana. Ghana is a country in Africa. To my knowledge, there's 50 plus countries in Africa. Africa is a continent. I had a friend of mine sent me something talking about Mos Def was leaving Africa. And I was like, okay, where's he leaving? Coming back home, or he's going somewhere else? And he was making it like, oh, you don't really want to live in Africa. It's a continent. It is not. It's like America. It's like Mos Def is leaving New York. It's like, okay, is he going to Georgia? Is he going to Texas, California? Where's he going? Because that's how I looked at it. It's like, it's a continent. There's 50 countries there. We call America the United States of America, and there's 50 states, but they're actually countries. Texas is one of the only ones that's been 5 different ones. That's where you get 6 Flags over Texas. Now there's 6. They're joining America. Dude, these people are like, oh man, it's like, dude, where's he going? But they make it seem like you can't live. You can live anywhere you want if your focus is there. You can live in hell if you want to. Who says this isn't? If you're focusing your wills to survive and to make it happen, you can live anywhere. But they make it like, oh, Mos Def is leaving Africa. And I'm like, you do understand Africa is 3 times the size. We're about to go back to work. So I'm going to cut that. But it's 3 times the size of the United States. So let that sink in. But that being said, showtime. Peace, health, and wealth.